Hello, everyone. My name is Kate, and my pronouns are she, her. I am the moderator for this session entitled Researching Research Support. I am moderating today from Jukchogay or Montreal on the unceded lands of the Gunyaga Nation. However, I recognize that you may be joining from a different place. As such, I encourage you to learn more about the Indigenous peoples' lands, waters near you by consulting native-land.ca. This session is being recorded and closed captioning has been enabled. Oops. Please reduce your streaming quality and keep your camera off when not presenting or interacting with others. All in attendance are subject to the Forum Code of Conduct, and this session will be 20 minutes long, followed by a 10-minute question and answer period. At that time, participants will be welcome to ask questions. Please use the Zoom chat function for informal exchange, and following the presentation, feel free to use the chat or use the chat to ask questions. If you would like to ask a question anonymously, please use the Padlet, and I'll go ahead and I'll post the link to the Padlet in the chat. If you experience technical difficulties during the session, please send me a direct message via Zoom chat or via email to lib-forum@concordia.ca. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to hand it over to Emily.
Hi friends, I am just going to make my presentation visible. All right, so hopefully you can hear now see my presentation. So I'm going to begin. So hello everyone, I'm Emily Cook. I am the Research and Instruction Librarian for the Humanities at Washington and Lee University Library in Lexington, Virginia. My pronouns are she, her. Kayla Monaghan, a WNL undergraduate from the class of 2024, will join me later via a recording. Unfortunately for us, but very fortunate for Kayla, she is currently studying abroad in Europe. So today I'll be talking about a collaborative librarian/undergraduate co-investigation to better assess the asynchronous needs at Washington and Lee University. Specifically, while I'll discuss some of the takeaways from the study, what really makes this project unique is the process by which we attempted to overcome potential barriers between librarians and our service population to assess these needs through a collaborative partnership with a member of our primary user group and undergraduate student. So let's go to the next one. All right. In the summer of 2022, undergraduate Kayla Monaghan and I began collaborating on a project to assess the needs concerning asynchronous research support, specifically by looking into the purpose and the utility of our library's online research guides, which are often noted by the brand name Springster's LibGuides or whatever you're currently using for your research guides. This was made possible thanks to WNL's Summer Research Scholars Program, which funds undergraduate involvement in research projects. In particular, we wanted to consider two problems we hypothesized were endemic to local research guide creation. So as you can see here, the problem is if we create a research guide without a specific request, guides may not actually meet a real on-campus demand. And the second likely problem is even if these guides meet an express demand, they might not effectively address actual student user needs due to confusing navigation, use of jargon, or other barriers. While these questions could be answered through a librarian-led investigation, which is often, what occurs with library research, we were interested in ways in which we could bridge the gap between our primary user population, which in our situation at Washington and Lee University is an undergraduate population, and librarians. Librarians' separation from the current undergraduate experience can serve as a barrier to fully identifying the needs, as levels of education, research experience, pervasive library jargon, and disciplinary norms creep into both research guide creation and then also the attempted assessment of the guides themselves. So how can you actually identify what students want if you can't speak their language? Here's just one example. So many of you may have experienced this. I was just talking to our moderator about this earlier. So reference is a term that is often used in the library world. And students who are, often 18 to 22 currently do not necessarily have the same referent point of the word reference. Same thing for periodicals or indices, as their methods of finding information often was never wholly grounded in the print world. Many of them have never seen or navigated on their own a print journal within a larger print run. So to overcome the separation, that's where Kayla came in. And we'll now hear more from her experience and from Kayla's perspective with her reporting. So I'm going to show you that now.
Hi, my name is Kayla Monaghan, and I am a junior at Washington and Lee University. And I'm a business and classic double major with creative writing minor. I am a certified library enthusiast, as our head librarian likes to call me. I've been a student worker at the library for the last 3 years, as well as helping to chair the library student advisory board. And so I've been able to work really closely with librarian Emily Cook for the last 5 years. When she asked me to help her with this research project, I was super excited. And I thought I had a really interesting opportunity to give a student perspective on a lot of these issues. So we really wanted to look at what is the research support for students, especially asynchronously in the library. Particularly, we decided to look at asynchronous research guides, or LibGuides, which is a term I'll use interchangeably because it's just the brand name. But we wanted to see if a lot of the guides that have been created over the years, one, were accurate and if they were helpful, and two, if students even knew they existed or if students would use them, because we'd seen that there's been a lack of usage of these resources that librarians spent a lot of time and effort on over the past few years. The way we were able to do this was amazing for me as an undergraduate to get the experience of, we designed the experiment, we designed a survey that we sent out and got around 97 responses, which is massive for a library survey at our small little school. And we also designed a user experience study that then we were able to conduct and actually get results from by the end of the summer. So I got the experience of creating all of these things with different mentors and guides, as well as getting to make an IRB proposal and really go through the whole steps of creating a research project. We decided to do a 2-for-1, as I described already, of looking at kind of some sort of assessment tool with our survey, and then actually doing a study based on interest of participants in that survey. Our ultimate goal was to figure out what students actually need and not what librarians think they need, because we figured there might be a disconnect. And our hypothesis turned out to be true. In the survey, there were plenty of responses that said students didn't actually want to interact with another human being and that they'd rather use some sort of asynchronous resource, or that would be their first step, would be to go to an asynchronous resource. And then later on, if they really needed help, to come in and talk to a librarian. So we were able to get a lot of honest responses and really apply those into developing our study, which then was a semi-structured interview process with some guiding questions and a specific task that we created, a fake class and a fake assignment in a LibGuide that they had to go find. And so it was actually me as a student who had to sit with my fellow peers and walk them through this interview process and to get their honest opinion. As a student, I think I was able to have a unique role in this, in that I understood the frustrations that some students might have and a lack of understanding of a lot of resources. So I did a lot of research in designing that study and coming up with different things, like we used the Goldilocks test of if they like certain aspects of the user experience, view the design, as well as think aloud tests, where basically they had to just tell me everything going on in their brains as they did it. As we were able to get results from this study, we were then able to take them back to librarians, which is a really exciting and interesting part of the process. There was a lot of feedback from all grades, including incoming freshmen who'd actually never used library resources before, as well as outgoing seniors who've been using it for 4 years if they'd known about them. And that research guides were actually a huge tool that students would use if they knew about it, but they would need it directly from professors. So bridging the gap between our library and our professors is going to be an important part of this process of revamping the system. We also were able to see how students didn't know these existed and how students, if they were curated specifically for a class, would use them. With that being said, they couldn't really find them. So we decided that we need to look at where they're located, how they're being shared, so that a lot of the hard work of the librarians don't go to waste. And also what kind, if they're updated on a regular basis and with like thematic consistency across different LibGuides made by different people over the years. It was also really fun to see people getting excited when they found out these existed to go dig and, oh, maybe my class coming up will have it, and that kind of thing. So the student enthusiasm was encouraging. And as a student myself, I know what a blessing it's been to have access or have knowledge of a lot of these resources that we have. So we really wanted to make sure we can share that with others. So as a student, I feel like I have a really unique role in this, and I was really excited to be able to grow into this opportunity as an undergraduate. And I feel like I've learned a lot about research, about study design, of course, but also in terms of the actual study, I was able to give a unique perspective into the way students truly use resource materials and research guides. And so we can help bridge that gap from librarians to students, as both Emily, a librarian, and a student were able to do.
So I'm so excited that Kayla was able to record that before she headed abroad. But as Kayla noted, she was involved in all aspects of the study creation. And you can see the study process outlined on the screen here. But from my vantage point, I wanted our partnership to be structured kind of like a college course. So I created, during the summer, a week-by-week plan that allowed Kayla to learn more about issues at hand as we were going through them, going through the literature review, consulting about user experience, etc. And then we gave her an immediate opportunity to operationalize that knowledge. So this included things like, as I said, reviewing literature on research guides, user experience, consulting with our university's assessment coordinator, and Kayla even actually served as an official IRB co-investigator, which is instrumental, as she was vital in the scope and delivery of the design. I will also note that she was on the IRB application after receiving our verification for research with human subjects from our institutional board. So Kayla was even the person to deliver our semi-structured interviews, which followed up our initial survey. And I think that she did a great job with that. And once again, she read up on how to do semi-structured interviews, and then practiced the little scheme off or the interview with our library colleagues before she actually did the semi-structured interviews with her colleagues and her peers. So as you can see here, it goes through the literature review process, through consultations, semi-structured survey, and then review of the data, and then eventually reported it out to our librarian colleagues. So I'm not going to go heavily into the survey that much because well, it's very specific to Washington and Lee, but things are pretty helpful. So I'll mention the ways in which Kayla was instrumental in this process specific to the survey. First and foremost, Kayla and our university assessment specialist, who was noted on the previous slide, Christy Krickenberger, were helpful in identifying library jargon. Here's just one small example. So initially we were going to ask students about their needs for citation information. And while I and my library colleagues would consider kind of instructional information about how to make a citation information, Kayla literally thought that would be a citation generator. So we were able to kind of meet in the middle and decide we were going to ask about citation how-tos. So additionally, without Kayla, we would not have been able to elicit 97 responses during the summer. So once again, we gave this survey in the summer months of 2022. WNL Washington University does not actually have summer school. The students on campus were summer research scholars like Kayla. And even that said, we had 97 responses, which was pretty exciting. Even with the incentive of potentially winning an Apple iPod or an Apple AirPod, I think a lot of that response is because Kayla was so ingrained in the student kind of information ways that she was able to spread the survey in a variety of ways, all of which were outlined initially as planned in our IRB proposal. But Kayla really provided the access to get some really quality responses to our survey. So here you can just see we had students respond to a scenario, and there are various questions that follow this, but the scenario was, let's say it's 2 a.m. and you have a research paper, annotated bibliography, or other research assignment due very soon. What resources do you think would you need to succeed? And then check all that apply. And that was kind of helpful at referring to the scenario as they go on through the survey. Yes, and we can just hear some other snapshots of the survey that might be potentially interesting. So then we also asked, like, from the above list of resources, were there any items which you are unfamiliar? Not surprisingly, research guides was up there. They also didn't know we had online chat support, which is helpful in branding and marketing. We have the next question, not the next sequentially, but the next one I'm going to show you, question 6. We asked, are you familiar with library-created research guides? A whopping 87 respondents said no, not surprising. Which is interesting considering the next one is below is an explanation of what a research guide is. So librarians use the research guides to curate knowledge and share information and organize class and subject-specific resources. These guides serve to aggregate topical or subject-specific library paid-forward content and research strategies in one location. Does this concept of a research guide sound like something you would actually use? Once again, this seems helpful. So they said 86 students said yes. So they like the idea of it. They just need to know more about it. And then this is kind of the free text version of our survey. So question 11 was, what would be the best way for you to access a research guide? So for example, would you prefer to access a research guide via Canvas, which is our kind of course management system we use at Washington University, just via the library website, a link that a professor shares with you, or some other way? And then you can see this is kind of a smash word cloud of all the ways people indicated they would like it. Honestly, link to professor was pretty common, Canvas, some said the library website. So that was really helpful moving forward. And then all of this information was used then kind of to inform our semi-structured interview. So we already had the questions that we submitted to the IRB when we moved forward with the semi-structured interviews. But this helped us thinking about follow-up questions that we would ask in response. And I will say that, I just said this. Survey participants did have the option to opt in to a secondary semi-structured interview in the initial survey. They could follow a link that ensured their identity was disconnected from the original survey response. And each interview participant received a $10 gift card to our local university store. So there was some sort of incentive. In the semi-structured interviews, we had 15 participants, and they were across a variety of majors and student grade levels. Kayla actually conducted the interview as we were trying to avoid the likelihood of students trying to give the correct answer when speaking to a librarian. We thought that honest feedback would be more likely if they were conversing with a peer. And once again, we're really happy that Kayla got the kind of knowledge from reading up about semi-structured interviews and the experience practicing on our librarians within Washington University to then implement our semi-structured interview processes. So you can see here, this is just another outline. This is part 2 of the semi-structured interview process. Once again, I know this is a lot of text, but all of my slides will be available if you're interested. I think I've already put them in the chat earlier on, but I can put them in again. Basically, they had a specific activity they needed to respond to, and Kayla used user experience, research, and best practices to kind of navigate to help students navigate what they were supposed to try to figure out how to do. So she used things called, as she mentioned before, the Think Aloud test and the Goldilocks test. The Goldilocks test is something too little, just right, too much, makes sense, right? Goldilocks. And she got a lot of information through this navigation process. Kayla also was instrumental in making kind of we call it fake library guide for a class, 123, that we populated to think kind of a best practice scenario for what could be in a research guide. We also didn't want any existing guides or the content of existing guides or classes to impact kind of what we were looking at in the study. So that's why we made our own for this particular course. And these are the interview highlights or our kind of interesting takeaways. So like I said, we had 15 interviewees across all grade levels, many disciplines and majors, and there are some really interesting trends. So Canvas integration within this or direct links from professors would be most likely to be used. Students often are not going to go seek things on the library website. That's just not a common information seeking behavior that we found. And then also once participants actually found the resource course guide, they thought it was very helpful. And once again, students are pretty much going to want to do what professors suggest. So that's really helpful moving forward, thinking about how we want to communicate with professors and students. And then this is just a really interesting quotation from our semi-structured interviews. So while all the information from the survey and some of the things I didn't go over because they're very specific to our instance of research guides at Washington University Library will be helpful to inform local practice moving forward, I was personally most impressed by the process of the study. So not necessarily the product itself, although I think that is helpful as well. It helped me further recognize the various lenses and power structures we bring to librarianship and its study. So on the screen is a quotation from a student in a semi-structured interview that Kayla conducted. It says, for example, if somebody like Emily, so I had come to a class for this student, came into class and like, this is useful resource and said like, this is useful resource, please use it, then I'd be like, okay, I guess I'll use it just because like if Emily tells me something, I will do it. So while I am happy students trust my opinion and, defer to that opinion in several situations, it does create an unequal power dynamic when trying to assess student need. So through Kayla's involvement, I feel we're able to better break down barriers and potentially inch toward uniting student need and librarian response. So I think I used my 20 minutes. Let's see, I will stop the share. Let's see. Hi, friends. So I'm happy to take questions. I think I have, could you share your survey? I can, yes. There are two places. Oh, sorry, the Zoom bars were placed. I'm sorry, that was interfering. Sorry about the Zoom bars. All right, any other questions? Jump to unread message. Okay, ask a question on Padlet. Any questions on Padlet? Don't see any. Happy to take any questions if you have any. Otherwise, yes, I can totally share the survey questions, and then also I can put in our semi-structured interview procedure we made. I can put that in now, and also reshare in the chat the link to the actual presentation, which may be helpful. Okay, view only link, copy. Chat link. All right, I put the link to the presentation in the chat screen. Okay, I got a friend, Megan. Um, has it helped you develop ideas about how to collaborate with students in the future in designing library services and resources? That's a very good question. And then from Catherine, do you feel the students were more truthful with answering semi-structured interview questions with a student asking them? Is this something you plan on doing more in the future? Okay, I will take Megan's first. Yes, it has impacted how I think about collaborating with students in the future and designing library services and resources. So at WNL, we have something called a Library Student Advisory Board that my colleague Elizabeth and myself kind of founded several years ago. And we do collaborate with them a lot on services and then also building. But I have been thinking with this information specifically how I could impact my pedagogy in collaborating with students. So the librarians are considered faculty. So many of us teach credit-bearing courses. So I once a year teach like a Writing 100 course. And I think it would be really interesting to bring in almost like a student expert or a student peer to also provide guidance in certain situations. And I've done that intermittently, but I do think that could be really helpful moving forward for students to see somebody that they have something familiar with, but also someone they can look up to. All right. So I am, okay. Let's see what else we got. From the Padlet, do you feel the students were more truthful answering the semi-structured interview questions with a student asking them? Yes. So I could just know, I'm the humanities librarian, so I get in a fair amount of classes, particularly introductory classes. And I think that because people know me in a classroom setting, in addition to, just seeing me or asking research questions, they're going to be less likely to be truthful, I think, because one, they think there's a right way to answer something often, and then also they might see me more as like a professorial category in some instances because they have seen me in a class. And also, students have a tendency, I think in a variety of ways, particularly if they're first gen, et cetera, to not want to like identify areas where they feel like they should know something, but they don't, even though there's often no one right way to do things. I actually even saw this with Kayla in her responses, although I think it was mediated a little bit. So in one situation, a student said in a semi-structured interview, my first year is showing in that she thought she should know how to do something, but because she was a first year, that's what was impeding her. And then Kayla did a wonderful job and said, like, no, it's not because of your grade or your status or whatever. We're just trying to see how the system works. This is nothing on you. So I do think that it does help mediate it a bit. And I think it would be good to do this in the future because I think Kayla got really good expertise with the interviewing, and then I think it just got us more reliable results. Okay, let's see what else. Will you include in any follow-up looking whether students do what they say? I'm curious about whether students tell you what they aspire to rather than what they actually do. That's a very good question. I don't know how. I think we could think about ways to kind of benchmark it. So if we make changes, then do they actually respond to those changes in the way that they have suggested they would want to use them? That would be very interesting. One of the most interesting things that I would say, at least from my vantage point across some of the both the survey responses, which we had 97 of, and then the semi-structured interviews, with that students kept saying, if my professor tells me to use it, I'll use it. And I don't know if that's a WNL thing or what have you, but particularly if students are very grade focused and they think some sort of activity is tied to achievable goal, like an A, they're very likely to use it. So that may inform kind of our marketing to professors and how we're creating these tools. And then we could see like if the professors are using it or are kind of giving it to the students or embedding it in Canvas, et cetera, are students using it? And we would have data to pull that. So I think that's one way we could kind of benchmark that with the follow-up. But that was a really good question, Suzanne. I guess we could also, once again, like do the study after making changes and have somebody navigate it and see if they're really using it. I know similar to another question about student response to peer versus you versus a professional. Oh, I don't think I saw. Oh, that's the one from Susan. Yeah, I think that was a different response. I think that's a good question, Susan. No, you're good. No, I think that was a really good question, though. And I think that's tricky, too. Like with anything, with surveys, right, you have kind of like an expectation bias or social bias. So you're going to say what the other person, you think the other person wants. I think that we're trying to inch toward that or inch away from that with having Kayla do a lot of the questions because students didn't think like she made it or she had any sort of ownership in this. But yeah, I think that's a really good question about like longitudinal ability to check whether or not the statements were true or if their expectations met actual reality. Those were very good questions. Who else was jealous that Kayla's in the Netherlands? I am. Hope she's having fun.
Okay, so if that's all the questions that are coming in right now, I'll just let everyone know that you can still ask questions after the session is finished on the Padlet. So feel free to keep submitting your questions and then Emily can check or we can forward Emily the questions after the session's finished.
And then Catherine, would it be okay if, so I can drag like the PDF or links to the PDF onto the Padlet for my survey questions and then the semi-structured interview questions to, I think it was either Megan or somebody else who is interested in getting that. So
Sure.
Would that be an okay place to put them? Okay.
Yep, that's totally fine. Okay. Okay, if there's no more questions, then we'll finish up the session. Thank you very much, Emily.
Oh, I see Olivia. I didn't respond to Olivia's question. Can I do that real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
I lost it. Depending on how long ago it was conducted, have you seen increased use of LibGuides following this? So it was conducted in the summer. And I think we've been slowly thinking about implementing some of the changes. But one of the things we have done is kind of use this information in more of our discussions so far with faculty members so why they would want to necessarily kind of like direct students to these resources, how they could be used, like the professors actually need to tell the students they are useful in order for them to be used, because sometimes professors actually do request we make them specifically for classes, and I think like so there hasn't been a broad change structurally in our LibGuides yet, but I think this information will be impacting. We are discussing now how we can make a more responsive kind of template that has kind of a thematic standard, which we currently don't have because we have different librarians doing different things. So this is all very helpful in those sort of discussions, which hopefully by this summer will all be put into place, or we'll have a better idea of how we can do that moving forward, and also how we can do things like make sure we're having a schedule for regularly updating the LibGuides, and making sure we're all communicating the same needs to our faculty. But that would be good then to check statistically, because Spring Chair does have very good like click rates and all that stuff, so we could do a good comparison eventually. Thank you, Olivia. Good question. All right, Catherine, I think I answered it.
Okay. Well, yeah, like I said, if you have any further questions, feel free to submit them on Padlet. And otherwise, we'll say thank you